Miles Chen stood motionless at his kitchen counter, the glow of his phone screen casting shadows across his face. His architect's hands trembled as he clutched the bank transfer confirmation.
It should have been routine by now, 6 years of the same ritual, but tonight it felt different. Wrong somehow.
Josephine's voice echoed in his head from the cryptic voicemail she'd left hours earlier. "We need to discuss the arrangements." Her father's voice. Not the frail, elderly woman he'd been supporting. If he didn't keep sending that money, what would Erica think? Watching from wherever she was.
Josephine Jefferson, his late wife's mother. A woman he barely knew despite 6 years of monthly payments. Polite but distant. Grateful but cold.
Her name had become synonymous with obligation, a debt he could never fully repay because the person he owed was gone, and now his bank account would be lighter by another $700.
It all happened so fast. Just a week ago, Marcus had needed new cleats for soccer. Malik's science project required supplies.
The landlord was sending eviction warnings about the $1,200 in back rent. Now he was staring at another transfer screen, his finger hovering over the confirm button like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. The monthly payment had become ritual. Of course it had. The same day, the same amount, the same sick feeling in his stomach as he watched money disappear that his sons desperately needed. Yet it all felt necessary. There had been no question in his mind when Erica whispered it with her dying breath. "Take care of my mother. Promise me." No hesitation in his response. Just a solemn nod, like finalizing a sacred contract. Miles hadn't cried then. He wouldn't break in front of her. But now, years later, in the cramped kitchen of his Atlanta apartment with bills stacked like architectural drawings on the counter, he was drowning. He wandered through the modest space, worn linoleum, outdated appliances, water stains on the ceiling, functional, barely maintained, but nothing like the life he'd imagined building. It felt like a cage constructed from his own promises. The bedroom door creaked open. Startled, he turned to see Marcus shuffle in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. At 10 years old, he looked so much like Erica. Same eyes, same gentle smile. Still in his Spider-Man pajamas, hair mussed from his pillow. He looked like he belonged in a family photo, not a crime scene investigation. Marcus didn't smile, not even a flicker. He spoke with a voice still rough from sleep, asking if everything was okay, if Dad was sending money to Grandma Josephine again. Miles straightened, exhaustion edging his words as he questioned whether Marcus should even be awake at this hour, whether he'd been worrying about adult things again. Unfazed, Marcus walked to the refrigerator and poured himself a glass of water, telling him calmly that he'd heard Dad on the phone earlier, heard the stress in his voice. He knew the pattern by now. First of the month meant Dad got quiet, got worried. Miles flinched at the observation from a 10-year-old, asking if that was what his son thought of him, now someone who couldn't hide his stress. Marcus turned, sipped his water, and confirmed it would be better if Dad just talked to them about money instead of pretending everything was fine. He and Malik knew they couldn't afford things. They weren't stupid, but pretending, that made it worse. Miles's heart sank, and he asked if that meant his sons had been keeping quiet about what they needed. Marcus set his glass down and told him plainly, they didn't want to make things harder, not when Grandma Josephine needed the money more. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unbearable. Miles forced the lump in his throat down and asked why Marcus was even bringing this up now. His son's gaze sharpened with a child's brutal honesty as he explained that appearances were everything to Dad. A grieving widower who broke promises raised too many questions in his own mind. It was easier to send money than to face the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something about this whole arrangement didn't add up. Marcus walked back to his room, leaving Miles alone with the bank transfer screen still glowing. The boy's words hung in the air like exposed structural damage, something that had been there all along, hidden behind the finished walls of his grief and obligation. Miles looked down at his phone, at Josephine's account number he'd memorized by heart, and for the first time in 6 years, his finger didn't automatically press confirm. Instead, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out the small wooden box where he kept Erica's final belongings. The sympathy cards Josephine had sent after the funeral. The account information scrawled on a piece of paper. The death certificate. He'd looked at these items countless times, always with reverence, treating them like sacred relics. Tonight, he looked at them with an architect's eye, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The handwriting on the account information didn't match the signature on the sympathy cards. Not even close. One was flowing, elegant, practiced. The other was sharp, angular, almost masculine. As if two completely different people had written them. Miles Chen had spent his entire career checking structural integrity, verifying load calculations, ensuring foundations could support the weight they claimed to hold. He'd built his reputation on attention to detail, on catching the small inconsistencies that could bring down entire buildings. But he'd never once inspected the foundation his entire life had been built on for the past 6 years. The bank transfer notification timed out, the screen going dark. For the first time in 72 consecutive months, the money didn't send. And in that small act of hesitation, Miles felt something shift, not relief exactly, but the uncomfortable awareness that sometimes the structures you trust most are the ones most likely to collapse. He picked up his phone and dialed the only person he knew who could help him see past the beautiful facade he'd been living behind. David Kim, his childhood friend who worked in financial analysis, answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "David," Miles said, his architect's precision steady despite the tremor in his chest. "I need you to look at something. I think someone's been lying to me about where my money's been going. And I think they've been doing it for 6 years." The silence on the other end was brief. Then David's voice came back sharp, alert. "Send me the account information. All of it. And Miles, if you're right about this, we're not just talking about a lie. We might be talking about fraud." Miles looked at the handwriting samples spread across his counter, at the account number that had drained $50,400 from his life, at the sympathy cards signed by a woman he'd never really known. His sons were asleep down the hall, trusting their father to make decisions that protected them. He'd failed them for 6 years by never asking the hard questions. That ended tonight. "I'm sending it now," Miles said. "And David, whatever you find, I need to know the truth, even if it destroys everything I thought I knew about my wife's death." The call ended. The bank transfer remained unsent. And Miles Chen finally began the investigation that would either prove his obligation was real or reveal that he'd been financing a lie constructed by the very people he'd trusted most. Miles Chen's phone buzzed at 6:47 a.m. with a notification he'd been dreading for 3 weeks. The landlord's message was brief, brutal, and bolded. Final notice. $1,200 in back rent due by Friday or eviction proceedings begin Monday. No exceptions. He stared at his bank balance. $843.26. The $700 transfer to Josephine was scheduled to process in 13 hours. Marcus appeared in the doorway, one hand pressed against his jaw, tears streaming down his face. The swelling had gotten worse overnight. The infected tooth they'd been trying to manage with over-the-counter painkillers was now a full-blown emergency. Malik stood behind his brother, fear etched across his 10-year-old features. "Dad, it really hurts," Marcus whispered. Miles called the pediatric dentist at 7:15. Emergency extraction, root canal, orthodontic consultation for both twins. The receptionist's voice was apologetic but firm. $3,500 minimum. We can do a payment plan, but we'll need $1,200 down today. The math was simple, cruel, impossible. Rent, $1,200. Dental emergency, $1,200 down payment. Bank balance, $843.26. Monthly transfer to Josephine, $700. Something had to give. Someone had to lose. Miles made Marcus comfortable with ice packs and called in sick to the architecture firm the first time in 6 years. He sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by overdue notices, arranged like blueprints for financial collapse. Electric company, water bill, the twins' school asking about unpaid lunch fees. Every envelope screamed the same message. You're failing. His finger hovered over the bank app, ready to cancel Josephine's transfer. Just this once. Just until he could catch up. Erica would understand, wouldn't she? She'd want their sons to get medical care. But that voice, her voice whispered through his memory. Promise me you'll take care of my mother. She has no one else. Promise me, Miles. He'd promised. A dying woman's final wish. You don't break that promise because of money. You don't dishonor the dead because the living need orthodontia. Miles pulled out the wooden box of Erica's belongings, looking for comfort, for guidance. The sympathy cards Josephine had sent fell across the table, 3 of them, written in those terrible first weeks. Her flowing handwriting spoke of grief, of gratitude, of shared loss. Then he found the account information. The paper was yellowed now, 6 years old, the account number written in sharp, angular strokes. He held it next to the sympathy cards. His architect's eye, trained to spot millimeter discrepancies in construction plans, caught what his grief had blinded him to for 72 months. The handwriting wasn't just different, it was opposite. Feminine versus masculine. Educated versus hurried. Right-handed versus left-handed. 2 completely different people had written these documents. Miles's hands shook as he pulled out his laptop. His breathing shallow. 6 years. 72 payments. $50,400. Sent to an account that Josephine might not have even set up. He'd never verified the account. Never asked for statements. Never visited her supposed new address after Erica's death. Never questioned why a woman who'd been financially independent suddenly needed exactly $700 every month. He'd spent his entire career checking structural integrity, verifying that foundations could support the weight they claimed to hold, that load-bearing walls were actually load-bearing, that what looked solid was actually solid. But he'd never once inspected the foundation his entire life had been built on. His phone buzzed. The $700 transfer was queued, waiting for final confirmation. 12 hours, until it processed automatically. Miles looked at Marcus, still holding ice to his swollen jaw. At Malik, watching his father with those worried eyes. At the eviction notice. At the handwriting samples that told him everything he'd believed might be a lie. For 6 years, he'd honored what he believed was Erica's final wish. But looking at those 2 completely different handwriting samples, a cold realization settled in his architect's mind. Sometimes the most dangerous flaws are the ones hidden behind beautiful facades. He picked up his phone and dialed David Kim. "I need you to trace an account," Miles said, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "And David? I think my wife's mother has been lying to me since the day Erica died." David Kim arrived at 6:30 a.m. with 2 coffees and the kind of expression that made Miles's stomach drop. His childhood friend didn't waste time with pleasantries. He spread printouts across the kitchen table like crime scene photos, each one a nail in the coffin of Miles's carefully maintained denial. "This account," David said, pointing to Josephine's routing number, "has activity patterns that don't match an elderly woman on fixed income. Not even close." Miles leaned forward, his architect's eye scanning the transaction history. "Deposits of $1,500 and $2,200. Sometimes $3,000, appearing weekly like clockwork. His $700 looked insignificant by comparison, just another stream feeding something much larger. Look at the timing." David's finger traced the dates. "Every deposit from you transfers out within 24 hours. Your money never stays. It's not being used for groceries or medication. It's being moved, laundered through Josephine's account like water through a pipe." The room tilted. 6 years of sacrifice, and his money was just passing through on its way to somewhere else. Someone else. "There's more." David pulled out another sheet, and Miles recognized the address format immediately. The account holder's address on file is Peachtree Tower Unit 3B. That's not assisted living, Miles. That's luxury condos. $4,000 a month minimum. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Concierge service. Rooftop pool.
Miles felt something cold crawl up his spine. Josephine told me she moved to a senior community. Something affordable. She said she needed my help to cover the basics.
There's no Josephine Jefferson at Peachtree Tower, David said quietly. But there is an Erica Chen registered to Unit 3B. Has been for 3 years. The coffee cup slipped from Miles's hand, shattering across the linoleum. Brown liquid spread like blood across the floor. But Miles couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His dead wife's name.
On a lease, at a luxury building, for 3 years.
That's impossible. Erica died 6 years ago. I saw her. Miles's voice cracked. I saw her in the hospital. I held her hand when she... Miles. David's voice cut through the spiral. Look at this. He pushed forward a bank statement with 5 highlighted entries. 5 separate deposits, all within the same monthly window as Miles's $700 payment. Different amounts, different source accounts. All following the same pattern: deposit, then immediate transfer out. Your account isn't the only one feeding this. There are at least 5 other sources sending regular monthly payments. Similar amounts, similar timing, similar purpose. David paused, choosing his words carefully. Miles, I think you're one of multiple people being systematically defrauded. And whoever's running this operation knows exactly what they're doing. Miles stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need to see that building. I need to see who's living there. Wait. David pulled a business card from his pocket. Before you do anything, talk to her. Linda Torres, private investigator. She specializes in financial fraud, identity theft. She's dealt with cases like this before. He hesitated, then added, Miles, there's something else. The word's getting around in the community. Mrs. Pocket Church mentioned her nephew in California sending money to his dead wife's mother. Mr. Huang at the association said his cousin's doing the same thing in Texas. Everyone's too ashamed to talk about it openly. But face-saving, Miles whispered. The cultural weight of it crushed down on him. The shame of being the fool. The embarrassment of admitting you'd been conned. The dishonor of questioning family obligations. David nodded grimly. They target us specifically because they know we won't ask questions, won't investigate, won't risk the shame of being wrong about honoring the dead. Miles looked at the transaction records, at his wife's name on an active lease, at the evidence of an operation so calculated it had been bleeding him dry while he worried about his son's dental bills. David's hand landed on his shoulder, heavy with the weight of the truth about to be spoken. You're not the only one sending money to dead wives' mothers. This is bigger than you think, Miles. Much bigger. Miles stood outside Peachtree Tower at 9:47 a.m., his hands shaking so badly he had to pocket them. The building stretched 30 stories above him. All glass and steel and money, the kind of place where doormen wore suits better than his own. Nothing about this screamed elderly woman on fixed income. The lobby was cold marble and abstract art. A woman in her 50s behind the concierge desk looked up with practiced politeness that died when she saw his face. Can I help you? I'm looking for information about a resident. Unit 3B. The account's under Josephine Jefferson. But...
Miles pulled out his phone, hands trembling as he found Erica's photo.
The last one taken before she got sick. Before everything ended.
This woman might be living there. Erica Chen. She was my wife.
The concierge's expression shifted to something between confusion and concern. Mr. Chen. Miles Chen. He heard the desperation in his own voice. Please, I just need to know if she's here. The woman, her nameplate read Carla Stevens, building manager, studied him for a long moment. Then she gestured toward her office. Come with me. She pulled up the building's database with practiced efficiency. Unit 3B is leased to Erica L. Chen. Has been for 3 years. Pays on time. Quiet tenant. No complaints. Carla's eyes flicked between Miles and her screen. Mr. Chen, I'm not sure what's happening here, but... Can I see security footage? The words tumbled out. Please, I just need to see. I need to know if it's really her. Carla hesitated, then nodded slowly.
This is highly irregular, but
She pulled up the building's security system, scrolling through timestamps. This is from the lobby camera, 4 days ago. The screen flickered to life, showing the elevator bank. Timestamp, 6:23 a.m. Then she appeared. Miles's world stopped. The woman walking through the lobby wore black Lululemon leggings and a designer sports bra, wireless earbuds in, expensive running shoes. Her hair was shorter, highlighted, styled in a way Erica never wore it. But the face, the way she moved, the slight tilt of her head as she checked her phone. It was Erica. His dead wife, looking healthier than she had in their last year together. Vibrant, glowing, alive. No, Miles whispered. No, that's not she died. She died 6 years ago. I was there. I held her while she... Carla scrolled to another clip. Same woman, different day. Returning from what looked like a shopping trip. Designer bags from Saks. More expensive athleisure. And, on her left hand, catching the lobby's lighting. An engagement ring. Massive. New. Not his. She jogs every morning, Carla said quietly, watching Miles's face crumble. Very friendly. Always says hello. Mentioned her fiancé works in tech. They're planning a wedding this summer, I think. She seems happy. Miles couldn't breathe. The security footage kept playing, Erica laughing on a phone call, Erica meeting someone for coffee in the building's cafe. Erica, living a complete life, while he'd been drowning in grief and obligation, and sending money to support the lie of her death. Mr. Chen? Carla's voice seemed distant. Are you okay? Should I call someone? He stared at the screen, watching his wife, his supposedly dead wife, check her mailbox with the casual ease of someone who'd never died, never left 2 sons without a mother, never destroyed a man with a deathbed promise that was nothing but strategic manipulation. When does she usually come back from her morning run?
Miles heard himself ask.
Around 7:30. Like clockwork. Carla paused. Mr. Chen, whatever this is, maybe you should. But Miles was already standing, already moving toward the door, his architect's mind struggling to process the structural impossibility of what he'd just witnessed. This wasn't someone hiding from illness or danger. This was someone who traded one life for a better one, leaving Miles to finance the transition while she built her upgrade. And in 6 days, she was going to discover that her monthly income stream had just run dry. Linda Torres spread the manila folder across Miles's kitchen table like a coroner laying out autopsy results. The private investigator's face was grim, professional, but her eyes held something that looked like pity. Mr. Chen, what I'm about to show you is going to hurt, but you need to see it. The first document hit like a physical blow. Hospital discharge papers from Mercy General, dated March 3rd, 2019, the day Erica supposedly died. Except the form clearly stated, patient discharged, stable condition, released to family care. Signature, Dr. Patricia Wong. She walked out alive, Linda said quietly. The stroke diagnosis was fabricated. Miles's hands trembled as he reached for the next document. Death certificate, signed by Dr. Robert Marsh. Linda's finger tapped the name. Marsh lost his medical license 4 months after signing this. Falsifying records, taking cash payments for fraudulent death certificates. He's currently serving time in federal prison. The cremation records came next, and Miles felt reality fracturing around him. The urn on his mantle, the one he'd kept for 6 years, the one the twins sometimes touched when they missed their mother, contained the remains of an unidentified homeless woman, Jane Doe, #4479. County morgue. Cremated the same day as Erica's supposed death. The funeral home has no record of ever receiving Erica Chen's body, Linda continued, her voice steady as Miles's world collapsed. The ashes you were given belonged to a stranger. But the worst was yet to come. Life insurance payout statement,
$75,000, paid to Josephine Jefferson as sole beneficiary. Beneficiary change form dated February 24, 2019, 1 week before the staged death.
Erica's signature, notarized, official. She planned this, Miles whispered. She planned her own death.
Linda pulled out a Ziploc bag containing Erica's jewelry from the memory box, the items Josephine had given him. This wedding ring is gold-plated, worth maybe $30. Your real wedding ring is probably in a pawn shop somewhere. She laid out photos next. These were printed on photo paper that wasn't manufactured until 2021.
2 years after she died, someone recreated your memories.
Miles stared at the fabricated photos, the fake jewelry, the systematic erasure of truth. Then Linda placed a final document on the table, and her voice dropped. Mr. Chen, there are timeline inconsistencies around the twins' conception. Given everything else we've found the calculated nature of this fraud, I strongly recommend a paternity test.
The words hit like a building collapse. Not just his wife, not just his grief, his children, his sons, the foundation of everything he'd built his identity around. Every memory he'd treasured, every sacrifice he'd made, every promise he'd kept to honor her legacy. All of it constructed by someone who'd studied the architecture of human vulnerability and built a monument to his exploitation.
And now he had to find out if even his fatherhood was part of the lie.
Miles's finger hovered over the bank app at 11:47 p.m. 72 consecutive months of payments. 6 years of never missing, never questioning, never failing his obligation. He pressed cancel transfer. The confirmation message felt like cutting a load-bearing cable. Transaction canceled. $700 remaining in account. Josephine called at 7:23 a.m.
Miles answered, expecting the frail, elderly voice he'd heard for 6 years.
What came through instead was sharp, furious, and 20 years younger.
What the hell do you think you're doing? No tremor, no weakness, pure rage.
Josephine,
Don't play games with me, Miles. That money needs to be in my account by noon, or there will be consequences.
the mask had dropped completely. Miles's heart hammered as he gripped the phone.
What kind of consequences? The kind where everyone at your firm learns what really happened in your marriage. The kind where your sons find out what their mother really thought of you. The kind where... You mean the marriage where Erica faked her death? Miles's voice was steel. Where she collected $75,000 in life insurance while I raised our sons alone? That marriage?
Silence. Then, you don't know what you're talking about.
Peachtree Tower, Unit 3B. Luxury condo leased to Erica L. Chen for 3 years. Miles heard her breathing change. Want to explain that, Josephine? The line went dead. Miles immediately called Linda Torres, who conferenced in FBI agent Michael Grant. Grant listened to the recording of Josephine's threats with professional intensity. Wire fraud, extortion, conspiracy, Mr. Chen. This is federal jurisdiction. I'll need everything you have. The doorbell rang at 4:17 p.m. Medical Courier. Miles signed with shaking hands, already knowing what the envelope contained. Paternity test results. He opened it alone in his bedroom, door locked, hands trembling so badly he could barely read the text. The words swam before his eyes until they crystallized into devastating clarity. Probability of paternity, 0%. Marcus Chen and Malik Chen are not biological children of Miles Chen. The twins weren't his. Erica had gotten pregnant with another man's children, married Miles, faked her death, and left him to raise sons who weren't even his blood. Every moment of fatherhood, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every sacrifice built on a lie. Miles was still staring at the paper when his phone rang. Agent Grant's voice carried sharp urgency.
Mr. Chen, I just got off with the fraud division.
The insurance fraud, fake death certificate, wire fraud across state lines, and now attempted extortion. Grant paused.
and Miles heard something like excitement bleeding through his professional tone.
Mr. Chen, we're looking at a federal RICO case, multi-state conspiracy, and you just became our star witness.
The text arrived at 11:34 p.m.
Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. Piedmont Park near the lake. Come alone, or I tell everyone about the twins.
Miles read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Agent Grant. The response came within minutes. Perfect. We'll wire you up. Don't worry, we'll have eyes everywhere.
At 1:47 p.m., Miles sat on a park bench, the recording device taped to his chest, feeling no heavier than his racing heart. Agent Grant's voice crackled in his nearly invisible earpiece. She's approaching from the north. Stay calm. Get her talking. Josephine emerged from the tree line, and Miles barely recognized her. The frail elderly woman from Erica's funeral had vanished, replaced by someone who moved with predatory confidence. Designer jeans, Burberry sunglasses, a leather jacket that cost more than his monthly rent. She looked 50, not 67.
You look good, Josephine, Miles said carefully.
Younger. Must be all that money I've been sending.
She sat, keeping calculated distance.
Don't be dramatic. You knew what you were signing up for.
Did I?
Miles kept his voice level, architect's precision controlling every word. Because I thought I was honoring my wife's dying wish, supporting a grieving mother on fixed income,
not financing luxury condos.
Her laugh was cold.
Fixed income. God, you actually believed that.
Help me understand then. Explain how this works.
Josephine tilted her head, studying him like a poker player deciding whether to reveal her hand. Then she smiled, and Miles saw the predator beneath the grandmother mask.
5 cities, nearly 20 widowers, all sending monthly payments just like yours. Your $700 wasn't even the highest amount. There's a surgeon in California sending $2,000.
A venture capitalist in Texas had $1,500. She spoke with entrepreneur's pride. It's brilliant, really. Sustainable income from permanent guilt.
Miles felt sick.
20 families? We target Asian and South Asian men specifically, Josephine continued, warming to her subject. The cultural pressure around duty and face-saving makes you perfect marks.
You won't question, won't investigate, won't risk the shame of admitting you've been fooled. She leaned forward.
Erica studied behavioral psychology specifically for this.
She knew exactly which pressure points to hit.
So, she got pregnant with someone else's children. To what? Lock me in?
Insurance, Josephine said simply. Children create obligation, permanent ties.
She knew you'd never abandon Marcus and Malik, even after she died. And she was right, wasn't she?
Miles's hands clenched into fists. In his ear, Agent Grant whispered, "That's enough. We've got her."
You built an empire on my grief, Miles said quietly.
I built a business on your weakness. Josephine stood, adjusting her sunglasses. Now send the money. Or
what? You'll destroy me?
Miles stood too,
and this time his voice carried steel.
You built your empire on faulty foundations, Josephine.
And even the strongest structures collapse when the load-bearing walls turn out to be hollow.
That's when she saw them, federal agents, emerging from concealed positions throughout the park, badges glinting in afternoon sun. Her face went white.
This wasn't just a woman who'd helped her daughter escape. This was a criminal strategist who'd turned cultural values into profit margins. And now she was surrounded. Josephine's eyes darted between the approaching agents, then locked back on Miles with desperate calculation. She grabbed his arm, voice dropping to urgent whisper.
Wait, you want the truth? Erica designed this entire system. Not me. She studied behavioral psychology in college, specifically for this mapping vulnerability patterns, calculating guilt thresholds, identifying optimal payment amounts that maximize extraction without triggering investigation.
Miles pulled his arm free, but Agent Grant's voice in his ear said, "Keep her talking. We need everything."
The pregnancy, Josephine continued, words tumbling faster. She got pregnant deliberately with another man's children. Some artist she met at a gallery.
She said it would lock you in permanently. Biological trap combined with emotional obligation. You'd never leave a pregnant wife, never abandon children, even if you suspected.
And after she died?
Miles forced the words through clenched teeth.
Arizona. Scottsdale, specifically.
She's engaged to Blake Garrison, tech entrepreneur, worth about $50 million.
They're living in a $2 million house in Paradise Valley.
Josephine laughed bitterly. She went from struggling architect's wife to Silicon Valley royalty.
You were never the endgame, Miles. You were the safety net while she built her exit strategy.
Agent Grant emerged from behind a tree, badge raised.
FBI. Josephine Jefferson. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, extortion, and...
It's not just him!
Josephine's voice cracked as handcuffs clicked around her wrists.
There are 23 active cases across Georgia, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Nevada. We target specific demographics: Asian American professionals, ages 35 to 50, high guilt tolerance, cultural conditioning, around duty. She was shouting. Now. Desperate.
The payment amounts are calculated using regression analysis. $500 to $2,000 monthly, calibrated to individual income thresholds.
We've collected over $600,000 in the last 4 years.
Miles watched Agent Grant read her rights, other agents photographing evidence, the entire operation collapsing like a building under controlled demolition. Everything he'd believed about love, family, obligation systematically dismantled by people who'd studied him like architectural blueprints, identifying load-bearing emotions they could exploit.
Mr. Chen. Agent Grant approached as other agents led Josephine away. We'll need your full testimony. But I want you to know, based on what we just recorded, we have enough to bring down the entire network, including your wife.
Miles looked across Piedmont Park, watching Josephine disappear into an FBI vehicle, watching the infrastructure of his exploitation crumble. For 6 years, he'd carried weight that was never his to bear, stood on foundations constructed entirely from lies. Miles Chen felt something he hadn't experienced in 6 years, the structural stability of standing on solid ground instead of foundations built from lies. But as Agent Grant's phone buzzed with updates from Arizona, Miles realized the hardest part was just beginning. Erica would be arrested within hours, and he'd have to tell Marcus and Malik that everything they believed about their mother and themselves was about to change forever. The federal courthouse in Atlanta was packed. Miles took the witness stand with the same precision he brought to construction sites, but his hands trembled as he placed them on the Bible.
Mr. Chen, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rodriguez began. How much money did you send to Josephine Jefferson over 6 years?
$50,400. While I struggled to pay rent, while my sons needed medical care, while I believed I was honoring a dying woman's wish.
The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pencils scratching on notepads. Miles looked at Josephine at the defense table, now wearing prison orange instead of designer clothes, her face hard and unrepentant.
And what did you discover about your wife's death?
That it was a lie. All of it. She's alive, engaged to a millionaire in Arizona, and I've been financing her new life while raising children she deliberately conceived with another man to trap me.
Gasps rippled through the gallery. But Miles wasn't alone. The prosecution had brought other victims, men who'd sent money for years, each one believing they were alone in their shame.
Jin Park, Korean-American engineer, $43,200 sent over 4 years. His dead wife was living in Miami. Rajesh Mehta, Indian-American physician, $67,500 over 5 years. His dead wife was in Austin with a new family.
Chen Wei, Chinese-American business owner, $38,000 over 3 years. His dead wife was in Las Vegas. 23 cases total, 5 states, and $600,000 in systematic theft, targeting men whose culture taught them that questioning family obligation meant dishonor. Judge Patricia Morrison's voice was ice when she delivered Josephine's sentence.
18 years in federal prison. You exploited grief as a business model and cultural values as weapons.
Erica's trial in Arizona came swift and brutal. 25 years. The architect of it all, finally facing the weight of structures she'd built on other people's destruction. The asset forfeiture check arrived 3 weeks later. $50,400. Miles stared at it. 6 years of stolen sacrifice returned as a single piece of paper.
But the money wasn't the victory that mattered.
In a different courtroom, smaller and quieter, Miles stood before a family court judge with Marcus and Malik beside him.
The adoption papers were simple, formal, legal acknowledgement of what had been true all along.
"Do you understand what this means?" the judge asked the twins.
"It means he chose us," Marcus said quietly. "Every single day. That's better than biology."
The judge signed. Official, final. Miles Chen, legal father of Marcus and Malik Chen. Miles Chen had started this journey, trying to honor what he thought was love. He was ending it having protected dozens of other families from weaponized culture and systematic cruelty. But as they left the courthouse, Miles's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number.
"You destroyed my life. Now watch me destroy yours. E."
The fight, it seemed, wasn't over yet. Erica's threatening text haunted Miles for weeks. FBI assured him she was in maximum security, that her reach was limited. But fear doesn't follow logic when it comes to protecting your children.
The hardest conversation happened on a Saturday morning, 8 months after the trial. Marcus and Malik sat at the kitchen table newly renovated, finally fixed after years of deferred maintenance.
Miles placed the paternity test results between them.
"There's something you need to know about your mother, and about biology."
He told them everything. The fraud, the fake death, the calculated pregnancy, the fact that biologically, genetically, they weren't his sons.
The silence was devastating. Then Marcus spoke, voice steady.
"So you chose to be our dad, every single day, even when you didn't have to."
"That's better than biology," Malik added, reaching for Miles's hand. "Anyone can be a father by accident. You chose us on purpose."
Miles broke then. Tears he'd held for 6 years finally released. His sons understood what love actually meant. The partnership offer from the architecture firm came with 30% salary increase, and his name on the door, Chen and Associates.
The $700 that once disappeared into fraud now went into college funds and therapy sessions, rebuilding what had been stolen. He met Julia at a fraud victim support group. She'd lost $40,000 to a romance scam, rebuilt her life through radical honesty. Their first date was awkward, authentic, built on transparency rather than performance. No masks, no lies, just two people choosing to trust again.
Miles's latest project was his most personal, a community center for fraud victims, offering free financial counseling and legal aid.
He designed it with windows that couldn't hide anything, foundations that could be inspected from every angle, structures built on truth rather than beautiful lies.
Saturday mornings became sacred. David and his family, the twins, Julia, chosen community gathering for breakfast.
The photos on Miles's walls showed authentic moments. Soccer games, fishing trips, failed attempts at cooking, ordinary happiness that didn't need staging.
One evening, Miles stood in his renovated apartment watching Marcus and Malik do homework at the table, Julia reading beside them, David's kids playing in the living room.
The life he'd built wasn't perfect. It was better real, transparent, chosen. Miles Chen had spent 6 years honoring a woman who'd never died, supporting obligations that had never been real, carrying guilt for failing a marriage that had never been genuine. Now he was simply a father who chose his sons every day, someone who'd learned that the strongest structures aren't built on duty or obligation, but on truth and conscious choice. And that foundation he knew from professional experience could support anything. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "Dad, can we get pizza tonight? Malik and I want to celebrate we both got A's on our science projects."
Miles smiled, typing back. Absolutely. Extra cheese?
Obviously.
Love you, Dad.
2 words that meant everything. Not because of biology or obligation or manufactured guilt, but because they were true.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye.